Some of the photos presented in this program are graphic in content and may upset some viewers.
The views and opinions expressed in this program are not meant to alarm anyone, but merely start an intelligent discussion about an interesting phenomenon, the possibility that an intelligent alien life form does exist and is actively making contact with the Earth.
Now, I'm going to concentrate tonight on what extraterrestrials have told contactees. Not that I don't want to shortchange the psychics and the channels, but I really don't have time. That would be a separate talk in itself. So we're going to concentrate primarily on what contactees have been told by our extraterrestrial visitors. Then remind me, because at the end of the talk I have 5 slides. And these are from a case in Brazil, a human mutilation case. Some of you may want to leave before I show them. They're rather grisly. I don't hesitate to say that. Grotesque if you like, grisly, shocking. The case is interesting because it's the first case that looks like it's UFO related of a human mutilation and death. And the cuttings on the body parallel exactly the cuttings on thousands of cattle mutilation cases and other animal mutilation cases that we've had in the United States. And we've had over 10,000 cattle mutilations. The public isn't very aware of that. So don't let me forget at the end. Many different kinds of earth changes that you will hear discussed by some of the contactees that I'm going to quote. It isn't that they're contradictory. It seems to me that it's just that they cover the whole field. We see everything from increased volcanism in their statements to increased earthquake activity to the likelihood of an extraterrestrial impact, that is an impact of an asteroid or a comet or some other foreign body. And as I say, they run the gamut. Some of these are peasants, totally uneducated people. Some of them, as you will see, are quite educated people. It seems inconceivable to me that some of the material, for instance, that's come out of Puerto Rico and South America could have been formulated as disinformation. It also seems pretty inconceivable to me that some of these individuals that are relatively illiterate, if not illiterate, could have manufactured in their little village the kind of stories that they're able to tell. So what I want to do first is show you some slides. What I've done here is put 2 sets of slides together. Some slides I show in workshops and some slides that I've been reserving for this kind of talk. But I'm going to show you both batches, and I'm going to have to move through them fairly rapidly because we only have so much time here. So let's begin with the slides. Could we dim the lights a little bit? This is the Mississippi flood of '93. It's really a minor earth change, but it caused quite a bit of devastation and havoc and 50 or so deaths, as we all know.
Just tell me that.
Yeah, all right. This is earthquake in India in September of '93. The reports kind of fascinate me. We had reports anywhere of 10,000 to 30,000 people dead. You would think in this modern day and age we could be a little more precise than that, but 10 to 30,000 dead. Take your pick. All right, next, please. This is Hurricane Andrew again of August '92. Looks like someone dropped a nuclear bomb. Again, there were around 50 people killed by Hurricane Andrew. Again, this is a minor earth change, but let me say that the intensity of hurricanes seems to be increasing. Now, the numbers of hurricanes in the Atlantic is not increasing, but the intensity of hurricanes in the Pacific and the Gulf area seems to be increasing, and the number as well. It's also true that tropical storms in the world seem to be increasing in number and doing an increasing amount of damage. Next. This is an earthquake in Armenia a few years ago. Next. We're back to Andrew here. I was doing a conference last week in Springfield, Missouri, and right before the fellow showed my slides, he dropped them all on the floor. And then he put them back in, and they were all upside down, but it didn't make any difference with the slide. Next slide, please. Again, Hurricane Andrew. One of the earth changes that's often talked about and has been prophesied by more than several people is an axis shift. An axis shift would probably, that you understand what I mean by that, all right? A shift of the Earth's axis of rotation anywhere from 1 degree to approximately 180 degrees, or anywhere in between. What would probably happen, it's been hypothesized, is we'd have winds of 200, 300, 400 miles an hour, plus gigantic tidal waves that would sweep the world. Whether any of us could survive a major axis shift is in question. Next, please. This is a picture of Mary Wonder on the left. She is a psychic and wrote an interesting book called A Message from the Stars. She was physically abducted several times by gray types. And let me say that many ufologists, for the great majority now, are realizing that we have more than one species involved here. There may be as many as a half dozen or more, anywhere from 3.5 feet to 6.5 feet tall. They just happen to be gray or whitish, pallid in color. They don't have any hair, not much in the way of ears, a slit for a mouth, and maybe a slit for a nose, and they look alike, so we've been confusing them. In the future, we're going to have to distinguish more carefully, if we can, one gray type from another, because I have a feeling some species are being blamed for what other species are doing. Now, as for numbers of species visiting us, the public has come to accept, I think, gradually that we may have one or two visitors, different species. If you talk to someone like John Lear, whose father was, the developer of the Lear jet, and John Lear is a acknowledged ufologist and a pretty good one, he'll tell you he thinks we're being visited by over 80 species. Colonel Wendell Stevens, retired, a man that the Europeans and the South Americans and Central Americans feel is our #1 ufologist, says he thinks there's more than 80 species visiting us. I believe there's at least a dozen or two. I don't know how many, but we are being visited by many. Some often, some fairly frequently, some infrequently. And they have different research agendas. They sometimes overlap those agendas and work together, but you can never be sure that one species is doing the same kind of research as such that another species is doing. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, but the Europeans do not have the abduction phenomena problem with gray types that we do. They have abductions, but the people come away, and sometimes they're invitations rather than abductions, and the people come away with good feelings, not negative feelings. Whereas in the United States, especially the United States, many of the women and men that have been abducted have rather negative feelings, or very strong negative feelings about what has happened to them. The man on the right is Jerry Wills. He's an abductee, a contactee. Jerry is an interesting man. He's a giant of a man too, by the way, very large man. When he was 13 years old, he had a discussion with an extraterrestrial species, and they told him that this world was a very dangerous place, and that they saw many large changes in society as well as geological changes in the future. Now, this is a statement that has been repeated numerous times to different contactees by different extraterrestrial species. They also talked about earthquakes, an asteroid impact, and increased volcanism in our future, and tremendous storms of various kinds. They also talked, he said they predicted, I talked to him about a year ago, he said they predicted the Gulf War quite accurately. He thought they were from Taw Ceti, the entities he was involved with. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. This is Mary Wonder. I said she was abducted physically several times. Then later, she was telepathically contacted. I believe in channeling, and I believe in telepathy. I believe in psychic phenomena. I definitely do. I just distrust about 90% of the channeling and telepathic events because so much can go wrong, and I don't want to go into the difficulties and dangers of that kind of transmission. But anyway, the entity that contacted her said it was from Andromeda. First we thought that was a constellation, because we do have a constellation of Andromeda, but later we've decided that it's probably what was meant was the Andromeda galaxy. They gave her in 24 hours to the point of total exhaustion, over 170 different symbols. They look like Mesopotamian, Sumerian pictographs. You know, pictographs preceded hieroglyphics. Pictographs are really pictures in writings. And they defined those for her, and then they gave her 4 essays of these pictographs in combination. And then they translated the essays for her, and they're earth change essays, and I find them fascinating. In those essays, they told her that there was a syndicate, a group of 3 different extraterrestrial species that were much concerned with the future earth changes of the Earth, and were, for that matter, making some plans to evacuate some humans, if possible. Let's go to the next slide, please. This is Billy Meyer, the famous contactee in Switzerland. He was contacted over 110 times from 1975 through early 1978, when the Pleiadians, the group contacting him from the planet Era around the Taygeta star system, broke off contact because they felt that his group was out of control, and he had failed somewhat in his mission. They wanted him to give public talks. They wanted translations of the contact notes. To this day, there isn't a good English translation of them. They never did that. The group told Randolph Winters, who is a Billy Meyer researcher, that they thought, and he spent 3 months with them, that they thought that anyone who wanted to read the contact notes should learn German if they cared enough. So that was their attitude. Well, they broke off contact with the man. He took over 1,000 good photographs of UFOs, and then later on, after 78, Wendell Stevens, elders, the Japanese, many people went over to visit him to analyze the photography. Wendell Stevens made models, Billy did too, and they tried to ascertain if it was possible to fake some of these photographs that Billy had taken. Well, unfortunately, over the years, some of these photographs have slipped out into the public domain. A few speakers, there's one in California notably right now, have got their hands on a couple of these photographs, and they say, see, Billy Meyer was faking phony UFO photographs. But they were model jobs. Wendell Stevens has offered just recently to meet anywhere with several of these critics and to point out which photographs were made by himself or the group he was with or involved with at the time, so this mess could be cleared up. Next, please. This is Charles Silva. He's an ex-CIA agent. He's in jail now. Some people think he was set up. He's in jail in Minnesota. He wrote a book called Date with the Gods. It's not real easy to get, but it's an interesting book. Date with the Gods tells the story of Silva's trip to Peru and his meeting with an extraterrestrial by the name of Ramatis, or Rama, she called herself for short. She did talk quite a bit about Earth changes, and I'm going to be quoting from her in a moment, as I am from some of these other people that you've seen on these slides. Let's go to the next one. This is Rodolfo Casiata, a UFO investigator from Central America, and Juan Valerio on the right. Juan's a peasant, and he and his son, first Juan, then his son later, have had numerous abductions. Next. This is Juan Valerio and his son, who obviously has some partiality to Marlboro cigarettes. Next, please. This is a crystal given to him by the extraterrestrials that abducted him. Next, please. This is an interesting photograph taken by him with a relatively cheap camera on the home planet of this species. Now, what I find, the extraterrestrial is on the right. You see the electromagnetic effect, the corona around the body? I find this a very fascinating photograph. One of the reasons why I find it that way is because an early contactee by the name of Howard Menger, some of you probably are familiar with that name. He is still alive, and so is his wife. He's in his 70s. He's one of the early ones, one of the few that is still around. He took a photograph of an extraterrestrial entity that had landed on Earth that he was having contacts with, and the same corona effect. Matter of fact, the pictures look very similar. Next, please. This is the writing of this extraterrestrial species. Next, please. It's almost cuneiform, Babylonian. This is Filiberto Cardenas on the left, a Cuban who's probably a native or a naturalized American by now, but he's been living in Florida for some time. And on the right is Colonel Wendell Stevens, U.S. Air Force, retired, and I've already spoken of him. Stevens has researched this case. Cardenas with his wife Iris, well, first Cardenas himself was abducted. Later on, we have a rather unusual situation. It's one of the rare abductions where the man asked if his wife, or another party for that matter, but in this case his wife could also be abducted or be taken for a ride, so to speak, in the future, and they agreed. So Iris and Filiberto both were taken. Next, please. This is where it happened, and this is a shot on the highway in Florida. Next, please. This is the extraterrestrial entity that, a sketch of the one that originally abducted him. This is Sisto Jose Paz Wells from Peru. I'm going to quote some statements from him in a moment. Next, please. This is a Reverend Del Mundo. It's a pseudonym. He, fundamentalist preacher, Reverend from Puerto Rico, and he's had numerous abductions. Next, please. This is the extraterrestrial entity Honesto that Del Mundo was and is in contact with. This entity claimed it was from a place called Koshnak, and Wendell Stevens has researched this case as well as others. Next, please. This is the spaceship of Honesto. Next, please. This is an entity, this is, relates to a case from Brazil. It's called the Reyes case, and it's Herminio and Bianca Reyes, who were abducted by this entity that called itself Karen. Rodolfo Casiato, the investigator, Central and South American investigator that I mentioned a moment ago, also researched this case. Reyes was a Jehovah's Witness and was much bothered by what had happened to him initially, but seemed to come to a greater understanding of that later on, and psychologically he's been able to accept it at this point. Before I talk about this graft, let me say that in Mexico City on July 11, 1991, there was an eclipse of the sun. Now, many Mayan scholars believe this was the signal. This initiated the Mayan sixth age, the sixth sun, because of remarks made in the few surviving documents, such as the Dresden Codex. We don't have much left of the original Mayan materials because the church fathers and soldiers did a very thorough job of destroying them. Conquistadors. But anyway, the Mayans very often used the sun eclipse to establish an end or a beginning of a period. So many of these Mayan scholars are pretty well convinced we have moved into the sixth sun age. Now that's interesting because along with that prophecy is the statement that when that happens, the gods will come down from the sky and there will be massive great earth changes on the face of the earth. The Hopi Indians have a very important prophecy. It's their most important one, that in the future, a great prophet, really a god to them, and his name is Maso, would return from the east, where he originally came, and would bring the other half of the tablets with him. The Hopis have one half, they have the other half. That prophecy is fairly well known. Another prophecy that is intimately related to that prophecy is a prophecy that before Maso returned from the east with the tablets, two messengers would appear to the Hopi. One bringing a sun disk, the other carrying a swastika. The sun disk standing for the beauty, the completion, the multifariousness of all of cosmic creation. The swastika standing for the motion of all existence of the cosmos, including the double helix of our DNA, for that matter. Well, on September 28th, at high noon last year, the two messengers did appear to the Hopi, and Thomas Benyakia, who was interpreter to the elders, he's of the Coyote clan, and they were given responsibility to bring the major prophecies or knowledge of them to the elders. Now, the elders are not the tribal council. But anyway, after this occurrence, then Thomas Benyakia went to the elders and presented the sun disk and the swastika, told the story. The Hopi have accepted these messengers, and Thomas Benyakia is now, by the way, he's in his 80s. He's not a young man anymore. He's now on the tribal council, which is a much more political wing of the or association of the tribe. The Hopis are having trouble. Some of the large corporations now want them to get off of their reservation because they want to mine it. Now, if you've ever been to the Hopi reservation, you realize that I'm amazed that these people can raise enough vegetables the way they do, but they do. I'll answer questions later, okay? But and the Hopi reservation's right in the middle of the oh, it slipped my mind, Navajo reservation, which is much larger. Okay, let's go on. Oh, all right, wait, no, don't go on. This is a graph. As you see, it says major United States earthquakes, and it's the divisions here are in decades, 10 years apiece. Well, it's obvious, isn't it? The last 10 years, worldwide earthquake activity is up quite a bit. If you go back 40 years, start there, or even 50 if you like, you can see the increase over the last 40 or 50 years. So this is from the U.S. Geological Survey, folks, and it's not just my opinion, it's their opinion too, that worldwide earthquake activity is increasing. At least their graph says that. Next slide. This is a susceptibility chart. The darker areas represent areas that have the most and the largest earthquakes. I don't think this chart would surprise most of you. You can see that most of California there is a very dangerous place to live. Now, in my book, Surviving Catastrophic Earth Changes, I talk about safe areas and what Edgar Casey said and what Dolores, I reproduced with Dolores Cannon's permission some of her maps. And I try to go into a general discussion of what might be a safe area or a safer area than other areas. But it's very difficult to make statements of that kind. You have to qualify them and then requalify them, because none of us know what would happen if we had an axis shift that created worldwide tidal waves, a place that might be above water after the tidal waves. Doesn't do us much good if we've been swept away by the tidal waves to begin with. Let's take a look at the next slide, please. This is a chart, major Southern California earthquakes. You'll see that California, gee, you know, we were born too late. Look how nice San Diego, how safe actually San Diego and San Francisco would have been. There was a major Long Beach quake in 1933, but look here, from about 1920 to 1970, California was fairly calm. And the geologists and geophysicists tell us right now, and I'm sure you've read mention of what they've said in magazines and newspapers, that California has entered a very active phase, which dovetails in with so much of what some contactees have said they've been told. Let's go to the next slide, please. This is the Ring of Fire. It includes California and Alaska and the Aleutian Peninsula. It has become increasingly active in the last few years. As I said earlier, if we have a half dozen to a dozen major volcanoes go off at once, that in itself could be a catastrophe for the Earth. It could appreciably lower temperatures everywhere. And 1 or 2 degrees can so severely affect food production in this world that parts of it that are not starving now, and there are plenty that are at the moment, parts that are not starving could be starving very soon. But anyway, there are many volcanoes in the Ring of Fire, and some have been inactive for quite some time. A map of major astroblems. And an astroblem is caused by in most of these cases, by a fairly large comet or asteroid impact. And you can see that the research in North America has been pretty good, and in Europe. The reason why they're gathered in that area is basically because that's where the scientists have worked hardest at. They'll admit that, and they do. And obviously, if we've been hit by asteroids like this in the past, there in our oceans should be many other astroblems. By the way, some of them. There's one in the North American plate up here that's over 100 miles wide. Must have been a big asteroid impact. Now you cannot find, and I talk about this in the new book, and I was distressed to find the disagreement among politically correct scientists as to how often we can expect a major what we call extraterrestrial impact, an asteroid, comet, or some foreign celestial object impacting near it. They don't agree. Some say maybe 10,000 years. Some say 28 million years. This is just a chart of, you might say, earthquakes in this century in the United States and North America and Mexico. The dots are earthquakes. The pyramids, if you can spot them, are volcanoes. Well, this shouldn't surprise us too much, except the quietness of this zone right here, where we've got that New Madrid fault, and it produced the largest earthquake the two largest earthquakes in U.S. history in it's right down in here, about in here. And that was in 1911 and 1912. If they happened today, they were in the 8.5 range, the estimate goes. If they happened today, you wouldn't have Memphis left, and probably a good part of St. Louis would be gone, plus all the small towns in the area. All right, next slide. All right, this is the case from Brazil. The case originated in 1986 outside of the city of Sao Paulo. Sao Paulo is 8 million people, and one of the reservoirs, the main one that supplies water to it, is called Guarapuringa. This man was found lying in Guarapuringa. Obviously, whoever left him there or murdered him there knew that he would be found. Whether he was dropped there or murdered on the spot, no one does know. And the police definitely do not know. The case stayed quiet. The chief investigator of the case at the time, the chief investigator of the case was a Dr. Cuenca, and he and his medical teams and pathologists didn't know what they had. They were very concerned by the strangeness of the case. They estimated, or they guessed that it might have been a vendetta because I have more photographs here. Let me stop right now and say if you get a little queasy in your stomach, now's the time maybe to step outside for a few moments. Most of us see this on TV every night and at the movies on the weekends, but this one is for real. Anyway, they speculate his scrotum was cut off, but his penis was intact. And they thought, this is a strange, usually if it's a vendetta castration, you know, the penis is taken and maybe the scrotum left or both taken, but not the way that it was found. All right, let's look at this. You cannot see it, but there is a small hole bored in the skull, and parts of the brain were sucked out through the small hole. The ears were taken off. The eyes were taken out. The lips and the flesh around the teeth was extracted. All of this is standard symptoms, standard effects of so many hundreds, thousands, for that matter, of cattle mutilation cases we've seen. The reason, by the way, that the photographs will be a little dark is because the light was poor at the time, and also the coagulated blood in areas in wound areas has darkened the photographs a little. Also, I took these. I went to Brazil in March, met A.J. Geveard, who's a friend of mine and was then. First, I went to Sao Paulo and talked to the lady who broke the case, and her name, and she's a delightful woman, her name is Encarnacion Zapata Garcia, which is one of the better names in the world. And she was shown these photographs and given copies of them by a Dr. Goes. Dr. Goes was given the photographs. It's Ruben Goes was his name. He was given the photograph. He was somewhat interested in ufology, but not especially knowledgeable. But he was shown and given a set of the photographs by his cousin, Ruben Sergio. So you see, if you're not a careful thinker and you're a UFO investigator, you can immediately conclude that most Brazilians have the name of Rubens, right? Anyway, Ruben Sergio gave his cousin, Dr. Rubens Goes, these photographs, and Goes thought that they were very peculiar. He got in touch with Encarnacion Zapata Garcia, and she was quite familiar with animal mutilation cases in South America, and they've had a lot of them, and in Central America and North America. And so then she met with the doctor in charge of the investigator, Cuenca, and he opened up the case, gave her the police files and the autopsy report. It's the only case in the world where this has happened. We don't know of any other cases for sure. I would guess that it may be some time before, if ever, another case like this surfaces, because if they do exist and authorities are aware of them, and what appear to be the UFO implications involved here, there's going to be suppression. Now, Wendell Stevens told me that in 1975 in East Texas, I think it was East, not West, East Texas, there was a case of mutilation very similar to this, but the government covered up very fast. Now, I haven't tried to research that. I might in the future. I wouldn't be surprised that there are other cases, there have been other cases like this in the world somewhere. How many? I don't know. I hope not too many, because I'm going to make draw some tentative conclusions in a minute, and they're the same ones actually pretty much the same ones that A.J. Geveard drew. A.J. is a ufologist. He's the editor of the only nationally syndicated UFO magazine in Brazil, and it's called simply UFO. All right, we were talking about the head area here. The ears, the eyes, part of the brain was sucked out through a small hole made in the top of the cranium that you can't see, and flesh taken around the mouth and the lips taken off. The tongue was extracted. Next photograph, or slide, please. All right, this is the man on his back. You can see the flesh that's been removed around the mouth. You can see it's rather dark, but the eyes are gone. You can't see that the tongue has been gone, but also the ears are missing. You see this shrunken area here of the body, the upper torso? That's because you'll see some holes in the body in a moment, and that's because much of the muscle tissue, including internal organs, has been extracted, literally sucked out. Now, any extraterrestrial species that was interested in legitimate research would not have taken body parts in this way. After all, first of all, they have, if they can get here, presumably they have techniques that would allow them to find out about everything they need to know about a human specimen without killing it, right? So this seems to be a blatant act. It's an act that has total disregard for we humanoids. Let's take a look at the next slide. And I'm going to speculate a little more in a minute. You see this? This hole here in the muscle, and there's another parallel one over here, same kind. It's about 1 inch in diameter. All the muscle tissue was sucked out of here. Let's move to the next slide. This is the man. Here, you see this hole here? Again, it's over 1 inch, 1.5 inches. It's an ellipsoid. There's one here too. The scrotum's missing. The penis is still there. There's a hole here where the umbilical cord, where the belly button should be, and they were flabbergasted that internal organs had been sucked out of that hole. You see how flabby the skin is here? That's because of the lack of internal organs and the taking of the muscle tissue. Next slide. Just as in so many cattle mutilations, the anus was cored out, 3 inches wide, 6 inches deep, perfect core. Now, the report suggests that the body may have had its blood intact, although in many of the cattle mutilation cases we find the cattle or the animals missing all of their blood. Although in cattle mutilation cases that I've researched within 30 miles of my own home, at least a dozen cases, the blood seems to have been left intact. Linda Howe and other researchers like Ted Oliphant, Tom Pratt, Tom Adams, Coleman von Kivetsky have noted that in a majority of the cases that the blood seems to have been drained. So what do we need to think of this? A.J. drew some conclusions, and I agree with him. He said, I think that most UFO species visiting this planet are neutral, and they're on their research missions. After all, look at us. We're fascinating. According to what they've told many contactees, we have these huge problems: overpopulation, pollution. We threaten to destroy ourselves with nuclear weapons. And they find us fascinating also because they say that we are a population made up of other extraterrestrial species, and that's where the colors come from. It makes more sense than any biological explanation that I've ever heard. After all, the Chinese, you could say, well, black people have melanin because they were in the sun more. How come then the Chinese don't have more melanin? Because the Chinese, as far as we can trace them back anyway, have lived in the coldest regions of the earth as well as some of the warmest. But anyway, so we're fascinating to them. They see us trying to get along and work things out with all the problems we've created for ourselves. I think if we went out in space, and someday we'll be doing the kind of exploration that's being done here, and if we found a civilization such as our own world civilization, we would be fascinated too.
My name is Stanton Friedman. I'm a nuclear physicist with bachelor's and master's degrees in physics from the University of Chicago. 3 different careers, 14 years in industry, working on very exciting advanced nuclear and space system development programs, companies like General Electric, Westinghouse, General Motors, nuclear airplanes, fission and fusion rockets, nuclear power plants for space. I think I've worked on more canceled government-sponsored R&D programs than anybody. I got interested in flying saucers in 1958, gave my first lecture in 1967, and since that time I've spoken at more than 600 colleges, more than 100 professional groups in 50 states, 9 provinces, 4 other countries. I spent 12 years full-time lecturing about flying saucers, and over the last 12 years I've mixed research, writing, lecturing, communications activities, and a lot of nuclear consulting work. I take a clear-cut, unambiguous stand about flying saucers. The title of my lecture is Flying Saucers Are Real, and I mean it. That is to say that after 36 years of study and investigation, 4 major conclusions. 1, the evidence is overwhelming that planet Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft. In other words, some UFOs, underline the some 18 times, some are alien spacecraft. Most are not, and I really don't care about the ones that are not. Second, the subject of flying saucers represents a kind of cosmic Watergate, meaning some few people within the governments of the United States, Canada, Britain, Russia, and a lot of other countries have known since July 1947, when 2 crashed flying saucers and about 8 alien bodies were recovered in New Mexico, that indeed some UFOs are alien spacecraft. Third, none of the arguments made by a very small group of noisy negativists against the first 2 conclusions stand up under careful scrutiny. The anti-arguments sound great until you look at the evidence and they collapse at their own weight. And finally, fourth, we're dealing with the biggest story of the millennium. Visits to planet Earth by alien spacecraft and successful cover-up of the best data, bodies, and wreckage by the governments, especially the United States government, for 47 years. It's a very big story. Gerald Anderson came forward after the second running of the Unsolved Mysteries program. And I spent many days with him, had him polygraphed. Now, he had one 53 or so minute conversation with Kevin on the phone. They never met. For some reason, it was a policy statement by the CUFOS, Center for UFO Studies, that it's a bogus site. And they tried 3 different schemes to take Barney Barnett out of the picture. First saying he lied to his wife, who was really to the east and rather than the west. Now, that's nonsense. In the first place, he didn't ever lie to anybody, as far as we can tell. Secondly, he always told his wife where he was going before he left in the morning, because there weren't phones out there, so she'd know that he might stay overnight out. And he worked out in the plains 40 different times that year, 47, never east of Socorro, and this is over 100 miles east and out in the boonies. It's out of his district. He certainly wasn't there. Then they said, well, he was programmed to disinform people. That makes no sense. He didn't disinform anybody. So I can find nothing on that. Gerald had come forward and said they made a mistake on the program, which they did make several mistakes. He said he was there with his much older brother, his uncle, his father, his cousin. There's a saucer stuck in the ground, bodies next to it, and he goes on, a lot of detail, and finally says the military showed up. And I'll never forget the nasty red-haired SOB who threatened to take me from my dad and all this kind of thing. And it was with a black sergeant. He was okay. Now, he had no way of knowing that just 2 weeks before, the second time around with Glenn Dennis, the mortician, I was asking him to describe the officers who had given him a hard time. And I didn't transcribe the conversation. It was on tape. And he was saying they weren't from the base. That was a key thing I wanted to know, that he recognized them. No, they weren't from there. Never saw them again, never saw them before. And there was a black sergeant, and he had told me there was a nasty red-haired SOB, the officer who threatened him. Now, here's Gerald 2 weeks later coming up with this crazy combination of a red-haired officer and a black sergeant. Crazy because the Army wasn't desegregated until 48. And I think I have an explanation for that, in that, incidentally, when I was giving a talk at White Sands Missile Range, there were some old-timers who were talking about Sandia Base. Gerald had said that the family said that the security people, this red-haired guy and so forth, were from Sandia, which makes sense. Very highly classified base in Albuquerque, surrounded by Kirtland. And the guy's telling me over lunch before I speak that you could go from Sandia to Kirtland, but you couldn't go from Kirtland to Sandia without a special clearance. And Sandia had a triple fence, usually 2 of them electrified, and dogs. And they came out one morning, and here's a couple of wetbacks drunk as skunks, and they couldn't figure out how did they miss the dogs and the electricity. Well, one of the black sergeant had said to Glenn Dennis. Glenn got mad at this guy bossing him around. Get him out of here. Don't say anything. Don't ever talk. He doesn't know what they're talking about. He says, you can't do anything to me. I'm a civilian. Sergeant says, use guys like you for dog food. Glenn says, we use guys like you for coyote bait. Great dialogue. But the dog food remark is a very peculiar one. I happen to know of a black sergeant who handled the dogs on a SAC base, security detail. That was one of the places where the blacks could work. Kitchen was another, incidentally. And if you look at the Roswell yearbook, the whole kitchen group was black. So there was no way that Gerald could know of that conversation. I hadn't told anybody. It was in person, not on a phone, so if anybody was listening to me, they wouldn't have gotten it. So that got my attention. And we did a lot of checking on him. We also found other people who substantiated crash into planes. Had a little letter in the Socorro Daily News Defensor, I think it is, Defensor Chieftain, strange little paper, weekly. Anybody who knew Barney Barnett, called me collect, gave a number. A man named Harold Baca called me. He lived across the street from Barney. And Barney had told him that he thought he got his cancer from being exposed to bodies next to the saucer out on the plains. I found a cowboy, Johnny Ford, lived in Magdalena, which is the main town, if you can call it that, going out to the plains from Socorro. He remembered a discussion about crash saucers, even came up with the name of the guy who was there and said he was going to go out to that area right near where Gerald said this was. And so I found a postmistress, Hart, who remembers the story and remembers what she had heard. Postmistresses hear a lot in small towns, was that it had been brought through Magdalena at night on a flatbed truck, tarps around it and stuff. So there's other testimony too. Barney's boss, Barney Barnett's boss, Fleck Danley. We talked to him, 15 years ago, Bill Moore talked to him. He remembered Barney saying it. He's the one who came up with the date, first part of July. We didn't ask him if that the date, we asked him what the date was and the location out in the plains. And then when we get Ruth Barnett's diary, 40 different days in 47 he worked out in the plains, Barney did. None east of Socorro. And on the very day when I think things happened, July 2nd, he was out in the plains. I think that's why Kevin wanted to come up with a different scenario, a different date. Get rid of Barney. He tried 3 different attempts, didn't work, so we know Barney wasn't out there on the 5th. That's when the crash occurred.
So I assume that you're still probing into the case.
Oh, yes. I've got a number of leads to follow up now, and I got one today.
Is there anything since the book, Crash at Corona, that you can share with us?
Well, we have more witnesses. I found a woman, how did I find her? Her grandson told somebody that his grandmother had once said something, and with a lot of work, I found the grandmother. She was living in Las Cruces, comes from a wealthy family, and somebody she knew, a truck driver, had told her that he had seen a saucer and bodies out on the plains, and he named 2 other people. And I was able, not too long ago, to track down relatives of those other 2 people, and the daughter of the man, the guys are dead now, happened to be at home when her father said something to her mother about the crash. And he was a game warden, I guess, and he had led an FBI man to the location. And so we've got a lot of this kind of stuff. There are others with regard to Roswell. There was just an article in UFO magazine about a new guy who came forward. I haven't checked him out, so I can't verify anything there, but I'm told he is in the yearbook, which is always a good check. I think that all the fuss about this silly Air Force proclamation will hopefully bring other people out of the woodwork, as will hopefully the Larry King show that's going to happen on October 1st.
This sort of anticipates my next question. Carl Flock recently released a report called Roswell in Perspective.
Yes.
Where he offers
the mogul balloon explanation, basically. Balloon. Although he does buy the bodies because he talked to I gave him the number of the medical technician guy.
How do you evaluate that study?
Well, Carl did a lot of good work, and he was especially good about new witnesses in the new scenario. His discussions with Kaufman and so forth are very good. I think that if you look carefully, now he talked to C.B. Moore, the head of the Mogul Project. Now, Don Berliner and I had talked to him. Bill Moore had talked to him over a decade ago. I think that he was taken in a little bit because Moore's positiveness, C.B. Moore, was based on the interview with the rancher Mac Brazel on July 8th, 1947, which appeared in the newspaper July 9th. We know that Brazel was programmed for that interview. He had been grabbed by the military. We've got family, his son says that happened. People who saw him in town with the military and he wasn't free to talk. Frank Joyce, the newsman, he comes in with this whole different story. In that interview, he describes a balloon, okay. And so it's not surprising that C.B. Moore says, well, you know, you look at the description of sticks and rubber and all this stuff, it's a balloon. Of course, we know that Brazel had recovered balloons twice, and the date he gave, June 14th, well, that takes it out of all the modern flying saucer stuff. So that connection is a phony one programmed by the Air Force. And if that took care of it, how come they staged the launch themselves the very next day over at White Sands? I mean, over at Alamogordo Army Airfield, right next to White Sands, of weather balloons with radar reflectors. Doesn't make any sense. I was the one, I had a researcher who was looking through the papers there and found that headline. Fantasy of flying disc explained here. Now, that's not a major newspaper, Alamogordo Daily News, but it went out on the wire. And that put an end to all these sightings that had occurred. I get a real kick out of the Air Force statement. There were 16 sightings. Some UFO buffs claim 800. Well, I've got the report. It's that thick. 853 in July and August 1947.
That's the official count, right?
Well, that's what this guy found by checking newspapers across the country. A man named Ted Blocher, and he has another 700 that he found later on more traveling.
So that kind of gives the lie to one of Flock's contentions that part of the problem with identifying the debris is that they called it parts of a flying disc without yet knowing exactly what flying disc was.
Flying disc was a generic term.
Right.
You see, what people tend to forget is that the Mogul balloon program did not employ sophisticated technology in terms of the structures that were involved. Balloons are balloons, and there were neoprene or polyethylene. It was the first time they were using polyethylene. But the notion that Major Jesse Marcel, the intelligence officer for the only atomic bombing group in the world, who had hundreds of combat hours in the Pacific, who had seen loads of balloon launches, was himself a pilot before the war, that neither he nor Colonel Blanchard could recognize a wreckage from a weather balloon or any kind of balloon, non-exotica kind, whose material any 3-year-old can tear, mind you, when we've got 3 kinds of material that defy that conventional explanation. One of them is this very lightweight foil-like stuff that you could crumple and unfold. A lot of testimony about that. Another was the I-beam-like pieces, and I've talked to Jesse Marcel Jr., who sketched the I-beam and the symbols along the beam. That was extraordinarily lightweight, the weight of balsa wood. Some people said he thought it was balsa wood. No. I was the first to talk to Jesse Sr., and I've talked to Jesse Jr. The weight of balsa wood, standard material for saying lightweight, you know. Couldn't cut it, couldn't break it, couldn't burn it. Now, balsa wood fails all those tests. And then this little heavier stuff, metallic sort of material that you couldn't break through with a sledgehammer. Make great skin for a rocket or a vehicle or airplane. We don't have anything like that, even to these days, you know. So, and none of that appears on a Mogul balloon.
Okay, let's kind of veer away from that topic right now because of your background as a nuclear physicist and working on all kinds of systems. And, of course, recognizing that you favor an extraterrestrial origin for these craft.
I came to that conclusion. I didn't start with that, but I'm stuck.
Okay. What are some of the propulsion systems that a civilization might develop to get from one star to another?
Well, okay, first we have to narrow the field a little bit. We don't want to talk about other galaxies here, just the local neighborhood, you know. Not billions of light years, but 37. Distance is Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 reticuli. Okay, I have worked on nuclear fission propulsion systems. A nuclear reactor about 7 foot wide, power level 4,400 megawatts was one that was tested out in the nuclear test site. I'm really more excited. I worked on nuclear fusion more than 30 years ago. This is what goes on in the sun, H-bombs. If you use the right stuff in the right way and kick particles out the back end of a fusion rocket that have 10 million times as much energy per particle as they can get in a dumb old chemical rocket, on a miles per gallon basis, fusion is the way to go. There are a whole host of other schemes. One of them might be having a big laser here. You zap the back of the craft and it spalls off material which goes this way and the rocket goes out. That puts the power supply not on the vehicle. There's always the use of cosmic freeloading. All our deep space probes use the gravitational fields of the planets on the way out. We don't need to supply the energy. The planet supplies it. God supplied it. Okay. There's kind of an analogy here. When you go from the big fat atom to the tiny nucleus, you can down in size by a factor of 10,000 and up in energy by 10 million per particle. That sounds weird, but that's the way it is. Okay, now we're flitting around inside the nucleus for subnuclear world. Again, you go down in size, undoubtedly up in energy that's involved. So when we learn how to handle that, we could probably make a propulsion system out of it. There is also, though, the astrophysicists love it, fourth dimensional space-time warping. Warping space and popping from here to there without being in between. I don't know how to do that, so I don't worry about it. But the key thing you have to understand here, Friedman's law, named after me, by me, modestly, of course, and that is that technological progress almost invariably comes from doing things differently in an unpredictable way. The future's not an extrapolation of the past. Lasers aren't better light bulbs. Nuclear rocket engines aren't just better chemical rockets. Micro-integrated circuits are not small vacuum tubes. New physics. Well, we've only had advanced technology for like 100 years. What if somebody's got a little head start on us, say 1 billion years? 1 million? 1,000? Who in his right mind is going to say he knows what the technology 1,000 years from now will be, no less now? So we're technologically unsophisticated on a cosmic neighborhood basis.
I don't know. A guy named Hornblower in one of the tabloids a week ago said we were supposed to get hit in the Middle West by an asteroid. Did any of you see that? It was supposed to destroy the Earth 16th or 17th, the middle of September. Speaking of, here we get into something here, you can go on and on. The Russians, who have been talking, the generals, the KGB people, even their former head of KGB, what's his name, Kulgan, was in New York not long ago trying to sell UFO information because they're on pensions of $40 a month and they're desperately trying to make money. The Russians told us that in all Apollo missions but one, our astronauts saw UFOs or ETs. And that in one of the cases, our lander was on the bottom of a crater and the astronauts got out and looked up, or looked out their windows, and there was 3 or 4 shuttlecraft sitting on the rim with ET standing there looking down at us. So you wonder why Buzz Aldrin had a nervous breakdown? I don't think these fellows are told very often what to expect. And I think it's hard for them to handle it. And so Buzz Aldrin may have drank a lot, but I'm not convinced his nervous breakdown was because of heavy drinking as such. Yeah.